I stumbled upon a secret bank account my dad hid for years. It had over $2 million, and the records revealed he'd been blackmailed for the last 15 years. I wasn't supposed to find it. Dad had been in Mercy General Hospital for 3 weeks after his heart attack, and Mom asked me to handle his finances while he recovered. I'd always known him as a careful man, balancing checkbooks to the penny, clipping coupons, lecturing us about turning off lights to save electricity. So when I logged into his Capital One account and saw $2,347,912.42 sitting in a savings account I'd never heard of, my stomach dropped. But it wasn't the money that made my hands shake. It was the withdrawal history. Every month for the past 15 years, like clockwork, $8,000, always on the third Thursday, always to the same account number, always with the same memo, monthly consulting fee. I scrolled back through years of records. The payments started in March 2009, right after my little brother Ethan died in that car accident. The same month our family fell apart. Dad had always told us the insurance settlement wasn't much, just enough to cover funeral costs and a small college fund for me. We lived modestly, drove older sedans, shopped at thrift stores. I worked 2 jobs through college because Dad said money was tight. Meanwhile, he'd been sitting on over $2 million and paying someone $8,000 every month for consulting. I called the bank. After convincing them I was authorized on the account, the representative confirmed what I already knew. Automatic monthly transfers to Sentinel Solutions, LLC. No other details available. That night, I confronted Mom. She was washing dishes when I slid the bank statements across the kitchen counter. "What is this?" I asked. Her face went white. The plate she was holding slipped from her hands and shattered on the floor. She stared at the broken pieces like they represented our entire family. "Where did you get these?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Dad's been paying someone $8,000 a month for 15 years, the same 15 years since Ethan died. What happened that night, Mom?" She sank into a chair, suddenly looking decades older. Her hands trembled as she reached for the papers. "Your father wasn't supposed to drive that night," she said. "He'd been drinking at his company's Christmas party at the Grand Union Bistro. I begged him to call a cab. I practically got on my knees. My blood turned cold. Mom, what are you saying? Ethan wanted to go to that midnight movie premiere. Your father insisted on driving him and his friends." Her voice cracked. "The police report said the other driver ran the red light, hit them head-on." I felt sick. "But that's not what happened, is it?" She looked at me with hollow eyes that had seen too much pain. "The other driver, Nolan Vance, he wasn't supposed to be there either. He was running from something that night, something your father knew about." "What did Dad know?" Mom stood up slowly, walked to our old filing cabinet, and pulled out a manila folder I'd never seen before. Her hands shook as she handed it to me. Inside were photos, bank records, police reports with sections blacked out, and a letter typed on Miller and Finch LLP letterhead. The letter was dated 1 week after Ethan's funeral. It was addressed to my father and signed by someone named Bethany Vance. "Mr. Miller," it read, "as we discussed, my client is prepared to maintain silence regarding the events of December 18, 2009, in exchange for the monthly consideration we agreed upon. Any deviation from this arrangement will result in the immediate release of all materials to the appropriate authorities." I stared at the signature. "Vance, like the other driver?" Mom nodded, her face etched with 15 years of buried pain. "His sister. She's a lawyer." "Mom, what is she talking about? What silence? What materials?" My mother closed her eyes as if the words physically hurt to speak. "Nolan Vance was fleeing a hit and run when he crashed into your brother's car. He'd just killed a pedestrian downtown and was racing to get rid of the evidence. So why was Dad being blackmailed?" "Because," she whispered, "your father saw him do it." The room started spinning. "What?" "Your father was walking back to his car after the Christmas party. He saw Nolan Vance hit that pedestrian, saw him speed away without stopping. Your father got the license plate number, even took a photo with his smartphone. Then why didn't he call the police right away?" Mom's voice broke completely. "He tried to, but by the time he got to his phone and started dialing, Nolan had already crashed into Ethan's car 6 blocks away. Your father had to choose. Give his statement about the hit and run or rush to save his own son. I felt like I was going to throw up. He chose Ethan, but Ethan was already gone," Mom said, tears streaming down her face. "The impact killed him instantly, along with his two friends, Daniel Hayes and Kevin Chung. Your father performed CPR until paramedics arrived, but it was too late. All three boys died at the scene, and Nolan Vance was unconscious, barely alive, trapped in his car. The names hit me like punches. Daniel and Kevin had been Ethan's best friends since Northwood Elementary School. I remembered their funerals, their devastated parents, the way our entire community had mourned. So, Dad never told anyone what he saw. Not at first. He was in shock, grieving. The police questioned him about the accident, but he only told them about Ethan's crash. He said he'd deal with what he witnessed downtown later, after the funeral, after we'd had time to process losing our son. I looked back at the photos in the folder. Traffic camera stills showing Dad's car in the downtown area, timestamps proving he was there when the pedestrian was hit, screenshots from his phone showing the photo he'd taken of Vance's license plate. But then Bethany Vance showed up at our house the day after Ethan's funeral. Mom continued. She'd done her research. She knew your father had been at that Christmas party, knew he'd been drinking, knew he'd driven Ethan and his friends home afterward. The pieces were starting to come together, and I felt sick. She had evidence that your father was driving drunk that night, Mom said. Security footage from the Grand Union Bistro parking lot showing him stumbling to his car. Breathalyzer results from Mercy General Hospital after the accident showing his blood alcohol was 0.09, just over the legal limit. She said if he reported what Nolan did, she'd make sure everyone knew that your father was the real killer, that he was a drunk driver who murdered his own son and two innocent children. The words hit me like physical blows. But that's not true. The other driver ran the red light. Doesn't matter, Mom said. She had lawyers, money, connections. She convinced your father that no one would believe him, that even if they did, he'd still be charged with vehicular manslaughter for driving drunk with minors in the car. She painted a picture of what our lives would become. Your father in prison, our family destroyed, you growing up knowing your dad killed your brother. I thought about all the years Dad couldn't look me in the eye when we talked about Ethan, how he'd leave the room whenever someone mentioned the accident, how he'd started drinking more, staying late at the office, disappearing for hours without explanation, the way he'd aged 10 years in the months after Ethan died. So, Nolan Vance got away with murder. Mom nodded. The pedestrian he killed was a homeless man named Marcus Johnson, a 42-year-old veteran with PTSD who'd been living on the streets since his discharge from Afghanistan. He'd been trying to get clean, attending AA meetings, staying at the shelter downtown. No family to speak for him, no one to advocate for justice. The case went cold within weeks, and Dad's been paying to keep quiet about witnessing it. Bethany Vance made it clear that if the payments stopped, she'd release everything. The traffic camera footage, the Grand Union Bistro security video, medical records showing Dad's blood alcohol level from that night. Testimony about his erratic behavior in the weeks after the accident. She said she'd destroy our family's reputation and make sure Dad went to prison for vehicular manslaughter. I felt a rage building inside me that I'd never experienced before. So we lived like paupers while this woman got rich off Ethan's death. Your father wanted to tell you the truth when you turned 18, then when you graduated college, then when you got engaged. But every time he tried, he'd imagine you hating him for choosing to protect himself instead of getting justice for a stranger. He was terrified you'd see him the way he saw himself, as a coward who let a killer go free to save his own skin. The weight of it all was crushing. 15 years of guilt, shame, and financial strain, all because one woman decided to profit from tragedy. What about the insurance money? The settlement? Mom laughed bitterly. There was no settlement. The insurance company fought us every step of the way, claimed your father's drinking contributed to the accident. We got $50,000 total, barely enough to cover the funeral costs for 3 boys. Everything else, every penny we lived on, came from your father's salary and that secret account. Where did the $2 million come from originally? Your grandfather's life insurance policy. He died 6 months before Ethan, left everything to your father. We were going to use it to pay off the house, maybe buy you a car for college. Instead, it became our prison sentence. I spent the next week diving deeper into research. I found articles about Marcus Johnson in the local paper, small mentions of a homeless veteran found dead on Commonwealth Avenue, hit-and-run driver never found. There was a brief interview with a social worker at the shelter who described him as quiet, kind, working hard to get his life back together. Marcus was one of our success stories, the social worker had said. He'd been clean for 3 months, had a job interview lined up the next week. Such a senseless tragedy. I tracked down Detective Samuel Evans, the original investigating officer on Marcus Johnson's case. He was retired now, living in a small house on the south side. But his memory of the case was sharp. "Mr. Miller," he said when I called, "I remember your family's tragedy. Lost 3 boys in one night. I'm sorry for your loss. Detective, I have information about the Marcus Johnson case, the hit and run from December 18, 2009. There was a long pause. "I'm listening." I told him everything. About Dad's witness account, about Bethany Vance's blackmail scheme, about the evidence she'd buried to protect her brother. When I finished, Detective Evans was quiet for a long moment. "Son, I've been carrying that case with me for 15 years. It was my first year as lead detective, and I knew something was off. The timing, the location, the way the investigation just died, it never sat right with me. Can you reopen it with this evidence?" "Absolutely. The statute of limitations doesn't apply when new evidence emerges, especially for vehicular manslaughter. And this blackmail scheme? That's extortion, tax evasion, obstruction of justice. We're looking at federal charges." He leaned back in his chair. "Your father's been carrying this burden for 15 years. Are you sure he's ready for what comes next? The media attention, the investigation, the trial? Vance is going to come at him with everything she's got." "He's dying," I said. "The stress of keeping this secret has been killing him slowly. His heart attack wasn't his first. He's had 3 in the past 2 years. I think he'd rather face the consequences than carry this guilt to his grave." Evans nodded. "Okay, but we need to be strategic. Bethany Vance is connected, powerful. She's got judges, prosecutors, politicians in her pocket. If we're going to take her down, we need to do it right." He outlined a plan. We'd need recorded evidence of Vance admitting to the blackmail scheme. We'd need to coordinate with the IRS and the district attorney's office. We'd need to prepare for Vance to attack Dad's credibility, his character, his memory. "She's been getting away with this for 15 years, Evans said. "She won't go down quietly." The next step was reaching out to Marcus Johnson's family. It took some digging, but I found his sister, Sarah, living in Phoenix. She was a social worker, married with 2 kids, active in veteran advocacy groups. When I called her, she broke down completely. "I've been waiting 15 years to learn what happened to my brother," she said through tears. "I knew the police investigation was incomplete. Marcus was careful, smart. He wouldn't have just walked into traffic. Someone hit him and left him to die. I'm sorry it took so long for the truth to come out. Don't apologize. You're giving me something the police never could, answers and justice." Sarah flew out the next week. Meeting her was one of the hardest things I'd ever done. She looked like Marcus, same gentle eyes, same quiet smile. She brought photos of him in his army uniform, letters he'd written from Afghanistan, drawings he'd made during his recovery at the VA hospital. Marcus struggled with PTSD, but he was getting better, she told me as we sat in a Starbucks near Mercy General Hospital. He'd been clean for 3 months, had a job interview lined up at a construction company. He was talking about getting his own apartment, maybe starting to date again. "I'm so sorry for what my family's silence cost yours." Sarah reached across the table and took my hand. "Your father was terrorized by a predator. Don't blame him for her crimes." That afternoon, I took Sarah to Mercy General Hospital to meet Dad. He was propped up in bed, looking frail but determined. When I introduced them, he immediately started crying. "I'm so sorry," he said. "I failed your brother. I failed you. I let his killer go free because I was a coward." Sarah sat down beside his bed. "Tell me about that night." For the next hour, Dad recounted everything he'd witnessed. How he'd seen Nolan Vance's car strike Marcus. How he'd watched Nolan speed away without stopping. How he'd tried to help Marcus but arrived too late. "I should have called 911 immediately," Dad said. "Instead, I called your mother, told her what I'd seen, asked her what to do. While I was wasting time, Nolan Vance was crashing into my son's car." "You were in shock," Sarah said gently. "You just witnessed a terrible crime. No one thinks clearly in moments like that. But if I'd acted faster, if I'd made the call right away, maybe the police could have stopped Nolan before he reached Ethan's car." Sarah shook her head. "The police report shows the crashes happened only 6 minutes apart. There's no way they could have caught him in time. Your son's death wasn't your fault." Dad broke down completely. "I've been living with this guilt for 15 years. Every day, I wondered if Ethan would still be alive if I'd done things differently. He wouldn't be, Sarah said firmly. Nolan Vance was drunk, high on cocaine, fleeing a crime scene. He was going to crash into someone that night. The only difference is that someone happened to be your son. Over the next few days, we prepared our case against Bethany Vance. Detective Samuel Evans introduced me to Assistant District Attorney Lisa Albright, a tough prosecutor who specialized in corruption cases. She was in her 50s, sharp as a razor, with a reputation for taking down powerful defendants. "This is a prosecutor's dream," Albright said after reviewing all the evidence. Clear evidence of extortion, tax evasion, and obstruction of justice. Plus, she's been profiting off a murder cover-up for 15 years. No jury is going to have sympathy for her. But Albright also warned me about Vance's likely defense strategy. She's going to argue that your father was the real criminal, that he was drunk, that he caused the accident, that he's trying to shift blame to avoid responsibility. She'll paint him as an unreliable witness with a motive to lie. But we have his photo of Vance's license plate, timestamped from that night, which she'll claim could have been taken any time. She'll say your father followed her brother to steal his identity, stage his own accident, cover up his own crimes. Albright pulled out Vance's file. She'd been researching her for years. Bethany Vance is smart, ruthless, and connected. She's represented 3 judges, 2 city council members, and the mayor's chief of staff. She knows where all the bodies are buried in this city. So what's our strategy? We go for the financial crimes first: tax evasion, money laundering, crimes that don't require a jury to believe your father's account of that night. Once we've got her on the federal charges, we use that leverage to get her to confess to the extortion. The plan was complex, but necessary. The IRS had been investigating Sentinel Solutions LLC for months, ever since I'd tipped them off about the unreported income. They traced the money through shell companies, offshore accounts, fake business expenses. She's been sophisticated about it, the IRS investigator told us. But sophisticated criminals make sophisticated mistakes. She's got 15 years of financial records that don't add up. While the federal case was building, Evans and I worked on gathering evidence about the blackmail scheme. We interviewed the Mercy General Hospital staff who'd treated Dad after Ethan's accident, documenting his blood alcohol level and emotional state. We pulled security footage from the Grand Union Bistro where the Christmas party had been held. Most importantly, we prepared to confront Vance directly. The plan was simple but risky. I would go to Vance's office wearing a wire provided by the district attorney's office. If I could get her to admit to the blackmail scheme on tape, we'd have everything we needed for a conviction. Remember, Albright coached me. You're not a law enforcement officer. You're a private citizen having a conversation. Anything she says voluntarily is admissible in court. What if she gets suspicious? She's been doing this for 15 years. She's arrogant, overconfident. In her mind, your family belongs to her. She won't be able to resist gloating. Evans fitted me with a wire, a tiny recording device hidden in my shirt button. "This thing will pick up every word," he said. "Just get her talking and let her hang herself." On Thursday morning, I put on my best high-end designer suit and drove downtown to Vance's law office. The building was sleek and modern, 30 floors of glass and steel paid for with blood money. Vance and Associates occupied the entire 28th floor. "I'd like to speak with Ms. Vance about the Miller account," I told the receptionist, a young woman who looked fresh out of college. The receptionist's demeanor changed instantly. She'd obviously been briefed on how to handle anything related to my family. "One moment, please." She made a quick phone call, then led me down a hallway lined with awards and photographs. Vance's office was at the end, a corner suite with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Bethany Vance was smaller than I'd imagined, but carried herself with the confidence of someone who'd never faced real consequences. She was impeccably dressed in a high-end designer suit, her silver hair perfectly styled, her makeup flawless despite being nearly 60. "You must be Ethan's brother," she said without standing up or offering to shake hands. "I heard about your father's condition. Terrible thing, watching a parent deteriorate. I trust the account transfer will continue without interruption during his incapacitation." The casual way she mentioned Ethan's name, like he was just a line item in her business ledger, made my blood boil. But I forced myself to remain calm. "Actually," I said, settling into the chair across from her massive mahogany desk, "I'm here to discuss a new arrangement." She leaned back in her leather chair, interlocking her perfectly manicured fingers. Oh, I wasn't aware our current arrangement had any flexibility. I pulled out a folder, not the real evidence, just copies designed to get her talking. See, while managing my father's finances during his illness, I've become curious about the nature of your consulting work. 15 years is quite a long business relationship. Your services must be extraordinarily valuable. Vance smiled, the practiced smile of a predator who thought she was still in control. Your father and I have what you might call a symbiotic relationship. I provide certain protections for your family's reputation and financial security. In return, he compensates me appropriately for my discretion and expertise. The wire was capturing every word. Protections from what exactly? Her smile widened, revealing perfectly capped teeth. From the truth about what really happened the night your brother died. From the consequences of your father's poor judgment and reckless behavior. Which consequences would those be? Vance stood up and walked to her window, gazing out at the city skyline like a queen surveying her kingdom. Criminal charges for vehicular manslaughter, civil liability for wrongful death, public humiliation when everyone learns that Robert Miller killed his own son and two innocent children because he was too drunk and too proud to call a cab. I forced myself to keep my voice steady. But according to the police report, the other driver ran a red light. Vance laughed, a cold, calculated sound that made my skin crawl. Police reports can be incomplete, especially when certain witnesses choose not to come forward with relevant information that might complicate the narrative. What kind of information? She turned back to face me, her eyes gleaming with sadistic pleasure. Your father witnessed my brother Nolan's unfortunate encounter with that homeless man earlier that evening. A tragic accident, really. Nolan was distraught, not thinking clearly after an argument with his ex-wife. But instead of doing his civic duty and reporting it immediately, your father chose to prioritize his own family's crisis. So you blackmailed him. Vance returned to her desk and sat down, her expression shifting to mock concern. I prefer to think of it as offering him a choice. He could face the consequences of his own criminal actions, driving while intoxicated with minors in his vehicle, failing to report a crime, obstruction of justice, or he could compensate me for my discretion and legal expertise. The admission was perfect, clear, unambiguous, recorded in high definition. And if he'd refused to pay? Vance shrugged, as if discussing the weather. Then everyone would have learned the truth about his drinking problem, about his negligence, about how his selfish decision to drive drunk killed 3 children. His reputation would have been destroyed, his career ruined, his freedom forfeited for 15 years, as long as necessary. Your father took something from my family that night, my brother's future, his cognitive abilities, his chance at a normal life. Fair compensation seemed appropriate, even though your brother killed someone. Vance's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing the cold calculation underneath. Nolan made a mistake, a momentary lapse in judgment. Your father made a choice to prioritize his own interests over justice. There's a difference. I stood up slowly. That's interesting, because I've been recording this entire conversation. Her face went from confident to confused to terrified in the span of 3 seconds. You can't. That's illegal. Actually, it's not. In California, only one party needs to consent to a recording. I consented. I pulled out my smartphone and stopped the recording app, though the real wire was still running. 16 minutes of you admitting to 15 years of extortion, tax evasion, and obstruction of justice. The district attorney is going to love this. Vance lunged for her desk phone, but I was already walking toward the door. Oh, and Bethany, the homeless man your brother killed? Marcus Johnson was a veteran who served 2 tours in Afghanistan. He had a Purple Heart and a Bronze Star. The veteran community takes care of their own, and they've been looking for his killer for 15 years. I paused at the door and turned back. Detective Samuel Evans sends his regards. He never forgot about Marcus Johnson. Neither did his sister, Sarah, who's flying in from Phoenix to finally get justice for her brother. Vance's face had gone from white to green. This is entrapment. You can't use this recording. I can and I will. You have about 30 minutes before the police arrive with arrest warrants. I'd suggest you call your lawyer. I left her office and took the elevator down to the lobby, where Detective Samuel Evans and 2 FBI agents were waiting. How did it go? Evans asked. I handed him the recording device. She confessed to everything. Blackmail, extortion, obstruction of justice, even admitted her brother killed Marcus Johnson. Evans grinned, the first genuine smile I'd seen from him. 15 years I've been waiting for this moment. 2 hours later, Bethany Vance was arrested at her law office, Vance & Associates, as she tried to flee through the parking garage. The charges were extensive: extortion, tax evasion, money laundering, conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and accessory after the fact to vehicular manslaughter. The story broke on the evening news. Prominent attorney arrested in 15-year blackmail scheme. I drove straight to Mercy General Hospital to tell Dad. He was propped up in bed, looking more alert than he had in weeks. "It's over," I said. Tears rolled down his cheeks. "What happens now?" "Now you tell the truth. Detective Samuel Evans wants your full statement about what you witnessed that night. The district attorney wants to interview you about Vance's threats, and Sarah Johnson wants to finally understand what happened to her brother." Dad nodded slowly. "I'm ready. I should have been ready 15 years ago." The next morning, Detective Samuel Evans came to Dad's hospital room at Mercy General Hospital with a video camera and a court reporter. For 4 hours, Dad told the entire story, every detail he'd buried, every threat Vance had made, every sleepless night he'd endured. "I know what I did was wrong," he said, his voice weak but steady. "I should have called the police immediately after witnessing the hit and run. I should have put justice for Marcus Johnson above my own fears. But when I heard about Ethan's accident, when I saw his car wrapped around that tree, I couldn't think about anything except trying to save my son." Detective Samuel Evans leaned forward. "Mr. Miller, you were a father who'd just witnessed a horrific crime and then learned your own child was dying. Your reaction was human, understandable. What Bethany Vance did to you afterward was criminal. The media coverage was intense, but largely sympathetic. The story of a grieving father terrorized by a corrupt lawyer resonated with people across the country. Editorial writers condemned Vance's predatory behavior. Victim advocacy groups rallied around our family. But Vance's defense team fought back hard. They held press conferences painting Dad as a drunk driver trying to escape responsibility. They leaked selected portions of his hospital records, highlighting his blood alcohol level from the night of the accident. "Robert Miller is a criminal who's been hiding behind his grief for 15 years, Vance's lead attorney told reporters. "Now he's trying to shift blame to an innocent woman who's dedicated her life to helping victims." The character assassination was brutal but predictable. What I hadn't expected was how it would affect our community. Ethan's friends' parents started avoiding us. Former neighbors crossed the street when they saw me coming. The local paper ran letters to the editor questioning Dad's version of events. "Let them talk," Sarah Johnson told me when I called her, frustrated and angry. "They don't know what it's like to lose someone and then be terrorized for 15 years. They don't understand how predators work." Sarah had become our strongest advocate. She gave interviews about her brother, about his service in Afghanistan, about the 15 years she'd spent wondering what happened to him. "Marcus was a good man who deserved justice," she said on the evening news. "If Robert Miller had come forward immediately, my brother's killer would have been caught that night. But Robert was terrorized into silence by a woman who profited from my brother's murder." The legal proceedings moved faster than expected. The federal tax evasion charges were airtight. Vance had failed to report over $1.4 million in income over 15 years. The money laundering charges were supported by a paper trail showing how she'd moved the blackmail payments through shell companies and offshore accounts. But the extortion charges required the jury to believe Dad's testimony, and Vance's lawyers attacked his credibility relentlessly. "Robert Miller has been lying for 15 years, Vance's attorney argued during opening statements. "He's an alcoholic who killed 3 children and spent 15 years constructing an elaborate fantasy to avoid responsibility." Albright countered with the recording of Vance's confession. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you don't have to take Robert Miller's word for what happened. You can hear Bethany Vance's own words, her own admission of guilt, her own description of 15 years of criminal extortion." The recording was devastating. Even with the defense's attempts to discredit it, Vance's voice was clear, her admissions unambiguous. She'd confessed to blackmail, extortion, and covering up her brother's crime. But the most powerful moment came when Sarah Johnson testified about the impact of Vance's crimes on her family. "For 15 years, I've lived with questions," she said from the witness stand. "What happened to my brother? Why did someone leave him to die on that street? Why didn't anyone care enough to find his killer? She looked directly at Vance, who sat stone-faced at the defense table. Now I know Marcus's killer was protected by his sister, who turned my brother's murder into a profit center. She didn't just steal money from the Miller family. She stole my family's right to justice. Dad's testimony took 2 days. He was in a wheelchair by then, tethered to an oxygen tank. But his voice was strong and clear as he recounted the events of that night. I made terrible mistakes, he said from the witness stand. I should have called the police immediately after witnessing the hit and run. I should have put Marcus Johnson's life above my own fears. But my mistakes don't excuse 15 years of extortion. He looked directly at Vance. Bethany Vance didn't just steal my money. She stole my family's peace, my relationship with my surviving son, my ability to grieve properly for my child. She turned my worst moment into her greatest opportunity. The cross-examination was brutal. Vance's lawyers grilled Dad about his drinking, his decision-making, his reliability as a witness. They suggested he was fabricating the entire story to avoid prosecution for vehicular manslaughter. Isn't it true, Mr. Miller, that you killed your own son and are now trying to blame an innocent woman? Dad's voice never wavered. No, my son was killed by Nolan Vance, who was fleeing a hit-and-run crime when he crashed into Ethan's car. His sister has been profiting from that crime ever since. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. When they returned, the forewoman stood and read the verdict, guilty on all counts. Vance showed no emotion as the verdicts were read, but I saw her hands shaking as the judge scheduled sentencing for the following month. During the sentencing hearing, Albright presented evidence of Vance's lavish lifestyle, funded by our family's suffering. Photos of her vacation homes, her expensive cars, her art collection, all purchased with blood money. Bethany Vance didn't just commit extortion, Albright told the judge. She committed 15 years of psychological torture against a grieving family. She turned their tragedy into her treasure. The judge sentenced Vance to 15 years in federal correctional institution, Danbury in Pennsylvania, and ordered her to pay restitution of $1.44 million, every penny she'd stolen from our family, plus interest and penalties. Ms. Vance, the judge said before imposing sentence, you perverted the practice of law and profited from murder. You showed no mercy to your victims, and this court will show no mercy to you. Nolan Vance had died in his care facility during the trial, never knowing that his crime had finally been exposed. Some might call that mercy. Others might say he finally faced his own judgment. The veteran community embraced our family completely after the verdict. They organized a memorial service for Marcus Johnson, attended by hundreds of people who'd never known him but honored his service and mourned his loss. Dad insisted on speaking at the service despite his deteriorating condition. Marcus Johnson served his country with honor in Afghanistan. He said from his wheelchair, his voice amplified by a microphone. He survived war only to be killed by a coward on a city street. His death was compounded by 15 years of injustice, 15 years of his killer being protected while his family suffered without answers. He looked out at the crowd of veterans, their families, and supporters. I failed Marcus Johnson that night by not calling the police immediately. I failed his family by allowing fear to silence me for 15 years. But today, we can finally say his name, honor his service, and ensure his sacrifice is remembered. The American Legion Post named their homeless outreach program in Marcus Johnson's honor. Sarah established a foundation to help homeless veterans find housing and mental health services. She used the media attention from the trial to raise awareness about veteran homelessness and PTSD. Marcus's death had to mean something, she told me at the memorial service. Now it does. Dad lived for 14 more months after the trial, long enough to see the Marcus Johnson Memorial Fund reach $2 million in donations, long enough to cut the ribbon at the new Marcus Johnson Veterans Housing Complex, long enough to walk me down the aisle at my wedding. Well, roll me down the aisle while on oxygen, long enough to meet his first grandchild, whom I named Marcus Johnson Miller in honor of the man whose justice Dad had finally helped secure. I can die with a clear conscience now, Dad told me the day before he passed. Marcus Johnson's family has answers. Vance is in prison. The truth is finally free. He died peacefully in his sleep, holding a photo of Ethan and surrounded by family who finally understood the burden he'd carried. I used Vance's restitution money to expand the Marcus Johnson Memorial Fund and established the Johnson Miller Justice Center, providing free legal services to families dealing with wrongful death cases and victims of criminal extortion. The clinic is housed in a renovated building downtown, just 6 blocks from where Marcus Johnson was killed. His photo hangs in the lobby, along with photos of Ethan, Daniel Hayes, and Kevin Chung, all victims of Nolan Vance's crimes. A plaque in the waiting room reads, "Justice delayed is not justice denied. Truth withheld does not become truth destroyed." Sometimes clients ask me why I chose to specialize in victim advocacy. I tell them about Ethan, about Dad, about 15 years of buried truth, and the predator who profited from our pain. I tell them that secrets are like cancer. They grow in darkness and consume everything healthy around them. I think about the night Ethan died often, about the impossible choices we make in moments of panic, about how one decision can haunt a family for generations, especially when predators smell blood in the water and move in for the kill. But mostly, I think about the courage it took for Dad to finally tell the truth, about Sarah Johnson's grace in forgiving him, about Detective Samuel Evans's dedication to a case that haunted him for 15 years, and about the knowledge that sometimes, even after 15 years of injustice, the right choice is still the right choice. Bethany Vance is serving her sentence at a federal correctional institution, Danbury, in Pennsylvania. Her appeals have all been denied. Her law license was permanently revoked. Her assets were seized to pay restitution to our family and taxes to the government. She'll be 74 when she's released, with no career, no money, and no legacy except the damage she caused. I hope she spends every day of those 15 years thinking about Marcus Johnson and the family that never got to say goodbye. I hope she thinks about Ethan, Daniel, and Kevin, 3 boys who died because her brother was fleeing the scene of his crime. Most of all, I hope she realizes that justice isn't about perfection. It's about courage, the courage to do what's right, even when it's hard, even when it's costly, even when it's 15 years too late. As for me, I sleep better now. No more secrets, no more lies, no more blood money changing hands in the shadows. Just the truth, finally set free, and the knowledge that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is refuse to carry someone else's shame. The Johnson Miller Justice Center has helped over 200 families get justice for their loved ones. We've recovered millions in wrongful death settlements. We've put corrupt officials in prison. We've given voice to the voiceless. But our most important achievement is simpler. We've proven that truth, no matter how long buried, always finds a way to surface. Even after 15 years, even when powerful people try to keep it hidden, even when the cost seems too high to pay, truth always wins in the end, because truth is the only thing that sets us free.